Okay, so this is your history lecture, and we are doing Malik Ghulam Muhammad. This is the part two of it. Part one I'll do later because currently we discussed this in the class. So Malik Ghulam Muhammad, page number 123. You should have your Nigel Kelly with you, okay? And we are on page number 123. What we discussed in the class today, constitutional matters, which is the revised report. So, like I told you, the format is very simple. You need to have your books, you need to have your copies with you, and I'm going to be teaching you directly from the book. So, even a weak student can catch up with everyone. Okay, so that is the format. So, this is like, please forgive the lights because I've got I don't have any studio right now. So, anyways, so page number 123, and the heading which we are covering right now is constitutional matters. So, now we had discussed earlier in the class that during Liaquat Ali Khan's time, uh, the first draft of the constitution was presented, and it was challenged, it was disliked, okay, it was criticized. So Liaquat Ali Khan withdrew it for further considerations, and before he could come up with a second revised report, he was killed, okay. So Khwaja Nazimuddin now presented the revised report of the, which you can say, the second draft of the constitution, on the 22nd of December 1952. Okay. Now, what were the basic plans in this draft constitution? So, number one was the head of the state must be a Muslim. So, being a Islamic country, to administer Islamic laws, majority of the people are Muslims, and Pakistan was created in the name of Islam. So, the head of the state means the president must be a Muslim. The heads actually of all the leading government institutions must be a Muslim because they have to administer the Islamic laws. Okay, so that's the first point. The head of the state must be a Muslim. Okay, what kind of a parliament will it be? It will be a bicameral parliament, and I told you bicameral means double house, upper house and lower house. Okay, majority in the world we have a bicameral parliament. In this one, according to this one, the upper house was to be called the House of Units, and the lower house was to be called the House of People. So again, the House of Units, that is the upper house, will have 60 members from East Pakistan and 60 members from West Pakistan. Likewise, in the lower house, which is the House of People, there will be 200 members from the 200 members from East Pakistan and 200 members from West Pakistan, which is the concept of parity. Parity means equal number of seats. So please remember, when we discuss the criticisms, we need to take this point into consideration. So second point is that there will be a bicameral parliament, upper house and lower house. The upper house will be called the House of Units, the lower house will be called the House of People, and there will be parity between East Pakistan and West Pakistan. In the upper house, 60 members from both the wings, and in the lower house, 200 members from both the wings. Okay, so a total of 120 members in the upper house and a total of 400 members in the lower house. Now we're turning the page, page number 124 in my book. Okay, religious minorities would have representatives at national provincial levels. Okay, so religious minorities, that means the non-Muslims living in Pakistan, they also need to have a voice, they also need to be heard. For them, there will be representation, they will have representation in the national and the provincial levels. That means in the National Assembly and in the provincial assemblies, they will have a voice, so that all the non-Muslims living in Pakistan have their voice, okay, heard, their concerns to be addressed in the parliament. Now, the cabinet was to be responsible to the National Assembly and not to the head of the state. This point is very, very important because, see, what is a cabinet? Cabinet is not your kitchen cabinet. Cabinet is basically like the cabinets I have around, okay, at my back. Not these cabinets. Cabinets is basically the ministers, okay, the group of ministers. So, say for example, if there's a power shortage in Pakistan, okay, so the minister responsible for power, I think it's Umar Ayub Khan right now. So he is answerable to the parliament, means the people in the parliament whom we have elected. We elect the parliament, we have elected the National Assembly, we elect the provincial assemblies. So the minister for power, if there is a power outrage in Pakistan, so he can be questioned in the parliament by anyone, not just the prime minister, but by anyone, even members of the opposition. Usually it's the opposition who's taking up these issues, people who are not in the government. Okay, opposition parties, like currently we have Muslim League Noon and Muslim League and People's Party in the opposition. So the opposition, can question, and we have elected the parliament. That means one minister responsible for the power, if there is a power outrage, this is an example to understand the concept that what is being responsible to the parliament means. So that means anyone in the parliament can question anyone, including the prime minister. Including the prime minister. Even our current prime minister, Mr. Imran Khan, is basically answerable to the parliament. He has to address the questions raised in the parliament, the concerns raised in the parliament, be it from the government or be it from the opposition. So that is like giving real power to the people of Pakistan, because we have elected the parliament. Okay, the entire population of Pakistan cannot come to Islamabad and give their concerns to the prime minister or get them addressed in the parliament. So we elect our representatives in the national and the provincial assemblies, and then they on our behalf raise our concerns and issues in the parliament. So that is being responsible to the parliament, not to the head of the state, means because the head of the state is not directly elected by the people. Okay, the president, at this time the governor general, but at that time at this time the governor general, but the head of the state is the president. So president is the head of the country, is the head of the federation, but he is not elected by the people directly. So when the cabinet, the ministers, including the prime minister, is answerable to the parliament, that means he is directly answerable to the people of Pakistan. So that is like giving more power to the, this is a democratic rule, and this is like giving more power to the parliament, more power to the people of Pakistan. So that is your point number 4. Point number 5, the head of the state would choose a committee of Islamic specialists to ensure that all legislations conform to Islamic law. Now in Pakistan, being an Islamic country, we have to be very careful that no law in the country goes against Islam. So this is what you call Islamic Ideology Council. Okay, the members will be elected by the ulama. They will be elected by they will be selected by, not elected, selected by the president. Okay, the head of the state is, that is the president, and they will see that if the parliament is passing any law, whether it is if some clauses may be against Islam, because the people sitting in the parliament are or they are not ulama, all of them are not ulama, so there might be some anti-Islamic clauses. So they will see that nothing goes, no law in Islam passed by the parliament is against Islam. So that is Islamic Ideology Council, जिसको हम उर्दू में कहते हैं इस्लामी नज़रियाती council. Okay, the official language should be settled by the assembly. So whether we should have Urdu or whether we should have Bengali, this question will be raised later on. This will be addressed later on. Now these proposals also met with criticism. So Nazimuddin said that they would undergo further discussions. Okay. Now there was criticism again. Now what were the major criticisms? The non-Muslims felt threatened. We've just discussed the points. Non-Muslims felt threatened that the head of the state is a Muslim. That means a non-Muslim in Pakistan cannot ever be on the topmost position like that of a prime minister or that of the president. Okay, so being Pakistanis, they said that why can't we be on the top positions? Okay, that was their concern. Even they objected to the Islamic Ideology Council because they thought that we will try to Islamize them. Okay, we will try to put Islam onto their heads. So they felt threatened, but that's not the case, because I told you earlier that it's an Islamic country, and to administer Islamic laws, and a Muslim head of the state, head of the government, the prime minister, president, they are required by Islam to protect the rights of the minorities, okay, given to them by Islam. If they are not doing it, that's a separate question, but they have to do it. Islam does not say that non-Muslims will not have any rights in an Islamic country, but to administer those Islamic laws, we need to have a Muslim, in office. But but the non-Muslims objected to it, because they thought that they will never get a chance to be on the top positions. But this Islamic country, state religion Islam, and the Islamic Ideology Council was just to check that whether the laws are in accordance with Islam or not. And East Pakistan, of course, East Pakistan had complaints about parity. Parity means equal number of seats between East Pakistan and West Pakistan. Now East Pakistan had more seats, had a bigger population. So definitely they wanted more seats in the parliament, but then to give them equal number of seats with West Pakistan was actually, it was like this. This is East Pakistan and this is West Pakistan. So they should have more seats. But what are we doing through parity? We are bringing them equal. We are making them equal. So this is what East Pakistan was objecting, that why this? Because if West Pakistan has less number of seats, so they should have has less population, so they should have less number of seats. So that was their objection. So it should not be like that. They should balance. If we are balancing them, then definitely we are subjugating the rights of East Pakistan. So parity for East Pakistan was a concern, and the official language is still not decided, whether it will be Urdu or whether it will be Bengali. So that was also their concern. So they met with criticisms, and Khwaja Nazimuddin had to withdraw the second draft of the constitution also. So moving on, further political changes and uncertainty meant that a constitution was not settled until 1956, when Major General Iskandar Mirza was in power. So we'll discuss that later when we come to Iskandar Mirza. As yet, Pakistan had no official language. Although Urdu had been suggested under the Qaid and had much government support, it was an issue that so many people felt strongly about that it would be hard to resolve without further unrest. The Bengalis of East Pakistan were particularly opposed to its use. Consequently, no progress was made on this issue. So that's what we just discussed. Okay, we are on page number 124. I'm reading and explaining side by side. Okay, so you are. I hope that you are following in your books. On 17th April 1953, Ghulam Muhammad dismissed Khwaja Nazimuddin and three other members of the cabinet, blaming them for not controlling the economy and the rights. So earlier we had discussed that the position of the Governor General was the topmost position, which was occupied by Malik Ghulam Muhammad. So he was going 2 steps up from a finance minister to the Governor General, while Khwaja Nazimuddin was coming 1 step down. From the Governor General, he was coming to the position of a Prime Minister. So the Governor General had the power to dismiss the Prime Minister. So he dismissed Khwaja Nazimuddin on 2 issues, blaming them for not controlling the economy. Okay, the economy was shattering, and the riots, which resulted because of the food shortages. So these were the 2 reasons why Khwaja Nazimuddin got dismissed in February. He did this despite the fact that they had received a vote of confidence from the assembly. Okay, so what is the vote of confidence? Vote of confidence is that if the Prime Minister gets the vote of confidence of 3/4 members of the assembly, that means they approve him of the Prime Minister, 75%, that is 3/4 of the members of the assembly, they vote for the Prime Minister, that we have confidence in him. That is what you call a vote of confidence. They give their approval to him, so he cannot be dismissed. So Khwaja Nazimuddin's dismissal was unfair because he already had this vote of confidence from the assembly. He had the approval of the assembly, 3/4, or maybe more than 3/4, but at least 3/4 members of the assembly had given him the vote of confidence. So Malik Ghulam Muhammad had no right to dismiss him. If the Prime Minister gets a vote of confidence, against it, it's a vote of no confidence. That if the Prime Minister gets 75% of the assembly, 3/4 of the assembly does not show confidence, does not approve of the Prime Minister, then he cannot remain in office. That is vote of no confidence. And vote of confidence is that 3/4 members of the assembly, if they approve of the Prime Minister, they show their confidence in him, so he cannot be dismissed. So Khwaja Nazimuddin had the approval, he had the vote of confidence, but despite that, Malik Ghulam Muhammad dismissed him. Okay, Nazimuddin was angered but decided not to resist. Okay, fearing that disagreements in the government would be disastrous for the country. So Khwaja Nazimuddin along with 3 other ministers were dismissed on these issues. It was an unfair dismissal. But then Khwaja Nazimuddin, as we had discussed, was a member of the Pakistan movement, a very active member of the Pakistan movement. He was an honest and trusted politician. So at this time he thought that Pakistan was newly created, and if there were differences between the Governor General and the Prime Minister, it would not be good for the country. Like I told you, that the President or the Governor General is like the father in your house, and the Prime Minister is like the mother. So unfortunately, if they are at loggerheads with each other, so it disturbs the entire house. So likewise disturbs the entire country if the Prime Minister and the Governor General or the President are not on good terms with each other. So Khwaja Nazimuddin decided not to resist and go back home. The new cabinet had 8 old members. Okay, 8 old members from Khwaja Nazimuddin's cabinet and 3 new ones. So 3 new members in the new cabinet, including a Prime Minister, Muhammad Ali Bogra, who had been the acting ambassador to the US. Now this is a very funny story, that Muhammad Ali Bogra was serving as ambassador to US, and he was being called. He didn't even know why was he being called, and when he landed on Pakistan, he was being congratulated that he is the new Prime Minister of Pakistan. So our history, I love history because history is full of such things. So I love history. So he was being called from America, and he was made the new Prime Minister by Malik Ghulam Muhammad. Malik Ghulam Muhammad was the sole in charge of the country at that time. Okay, so the new cabinet had 8 old members and 3 new ones, because the three were dismissed, including Khwaja Nazimuddin. So replacing them, was Muhammad Ali Bogra and two other ministers and the 8 old members. So this was the new cabinet, new government setup. Okay, we'll just study a bit about we have 5 minutes. I tend to keep these lectures for 20 minutes, so we still have 5 minutes, so we can continue. Bogra wanted as much aid as possible to boost Pakistan's economy, since Pakistan was in an economic disaster at that time. In April 1953, the US, Canada and Australia agreed to send Pakistan 1,000,000 tons of wheat. This is what we had discussed earlier, to resolve the wheat crisis, which helped to calm fears of famine that had sparked the riots. Okay, so Muhammad Ali Bogra was responsible for that aid that came to Pakistan. It was also Bogra who set up the planning board. We discussed the planning board, 1953. So it was also Bogra who set up the planning board to produce a 5-year plan that would hopefully avoid further food shortages. So Muhammad Ali Bogra was a man of his caliber. Okay, he was an intelligent man. So he got this 5-year plan also, which was to follow up from the 6-year plan. So there were no fears of food shortages later in Pakistan. He also worked out a regional agreement called the Central Treaty Organization, CENTO. So this was also his credit. At that time, it was a pact with America, CENTO, and Muhammad Ali Bogra got Pakistan into this, and we'll study CENTO later on when we'll do the international relations. Part of this involved the Western aid for Pakistan in terms of money, being a member of the CENTO. So what benefit did we had? Part of this involved Western aid for Pakistan. So we got a lot of aid from Pakistan, for Pakistan from Western countries, especially from America, in terms of money, supplies, that means for the army, and help of various industrial experts. So Pakistan at that time was developing its industries. We needed experts. So we got the benefit from CENTO. We got 3 benefits: that we got money, we got army supplies, and we got industrial experts. So Muhammad Ali Bogra, was a capable man, and he proved himself as the Prime Minister of Pakistan, and he was responsible for these achievements of Pakistan during his time. So let's just stop over here. Tomorrow I'll complete this chapter, and so the history lecture of today ends over here. So much of it we have done in the class, but few of the new points are being included. So I hope that you will have a review and a recap of what we have done today in the class.